What is up, you spooky bitches? We are back and we have another episode of the Hello Sidney podcast here, a podcast for horror lovers where we discuss any and all things horror. And it's me, your girl, Sidney. Happy Friday. Happy first Friday of Stephen King month. Happy spooky season, because it's fucking spooky season year round to us, right? But that really starts in September. Shit's getting spooky. The air is getting crisp. I am in my new setup if you are watching the video episode. I know it's very anticlimactic right now, and that is because behind me is simply a black wall. If you're not listening to the video episode or watching the video episode, which by the way is on Spotify or YouTube if you want to see what I'm talking about, I have nothing set up on my wall yet because I am ordering a neon sign in red with my podcast name on it, and then I am going to model everything else around that. So I haven't ordered the sign yet, so it'll probably be a couple more weeks until we are up and running. But look at this fucking beauty of a couch. Would you look at her? She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. This was such a steal. I don't know if I told you guys the story, but I'm going to tell it again if I have. I'm sorry. When I was moving into this house, I just got a new house, and that's why I have this new setup. I was like, in my office, I have a vision. I want my walls to be black. I want to have shelves set up with all my stuff, which I do. I'll do a full tour when it's done and ready. And I want a velvet Victorian style couch to be my setup, like to be my main center. And behind it, I'm going to have a neon sign with my podcast name and all my horror art all around it. And everybody's like, where the fuck are you going to get a Victorian couch? I'm like, I don't know. I look them up. They're like $1,400 on Wayfair, which you know is for like a knockoff version that's probably going to break in a year. And I'm like, where the hell am I going to find this? I walk into a thrift store or consignment store one day with my aunt because I told her that. And she's like, we should check this place out there. In all its glory is this beauty for $600. What a steal. Are you kidding me? She might be my most prized possession. I haven't named her yet, but I have definitely personified her and called her a she, and that's what I referred to her as, and I just love her so much. So yeah, sorry this is a bit anticlimactic in terms of the background, because again, you're just staring into the black blank void, so get used to that for probably the next couple weeks, but we'll get it up and running, and it'll be real nice. I got like a new mic stand so I don't have to hold this thing anymore because like your girl's getting old. My arm starts to cramp. So we're going to figure it out. We're going to get there. Again, I'm just happy to be in here and on this couch. This is it's all I could ask for. I love her. I love this thing. So we're continuing on with Stephen King month today, and we are doing that by talking about what I believe to be an underrated gem, which is Silver Bullet from 1985. And this movie was based on Stephen King's novella, which is called Cycle of a Werewolf from 1983. And that originally was meant to just be like a calendar, and every month was going to be like a different werewolf kill, and Stephen King was going to like write a little excerpt for it. And so was birthed Cycle of the Werewolf, which if you look at it in a bookstore, it looks like a comic book, and it kind of is. And basically it takes place throughout a calendar year, and every month the werewolf commits one murder on the night of the full moon. So the movie's a bit different in that instead of taking place over a year, it takes place over the span of just a couple months. But this is one of the earlier werewolf movies that I had ever seen. It actually might be the first werewolf movie I've ever seen, and this is another one like Misery. If you listen to that episode, this was kind of like a staple in my childhood growing up. Like I watched Silver Bullet so much, and it's really one of the movies that like helped shaped my love for the genre, so it's very near and dear to me. I know it's not the best movie, but I fucking love it so much. And it might be my favorite werewolf movie just like for the nostalgia purposes. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Silver Bullet, again, came out in 1985. It's about an hour and 35 minutes, so quick watch. It has a 6.4 on IMDb, which is pretty good, not bad for a horror movie, and a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't think is fair. I'm a hater on Rotten Tomatoes for that because I think it at least deserves better than that. And the interesting thing about this movie is Roger Ebert, who historically was a huge, massive hater of horror movies, probably like number one hater, actually liked this movie and rated it well. So like if he's rating it well, I don't know what the fuck these critics are talking about. But the movie opens and we get a shot of the full moon, and that's very fitting. And we get our opening credits with that. And then we hear a woman, and we're going to get a voiceover. And this woman is going to be Jane, who is going to be one of our main characters, but she's a main character as a teenager. But we get a voiceover from her as an adult, like she's recounting the story. And she starts to talk about how the last full moon of spring was a month before school ended. And that was the night that the town's nightmare began. And we see that we're in spring of 1976. So we cut to this guy, Arnie, and he's working on this railroad and it's nighttime and he's driving around on this little tractor thing and suddenly he starts to hear footsteps in the woods and he looks up and he looks around, but then he just moves on. He continues on and we then start to hear growling coming from the tree and we get a POV as if we're the thing in the tree line watching him. So we know this thing is going to come after Arnie. So Arnie continues to do his job and just work around the railroad when suddenly he comes across this giant footstep and he just looks at it and he says, oh shit. And suddenly this shadow comes over him and he looks up and we don't see the werewolf at this point, but we just see this giant claw come into frame and just swing at him and he is instantly beheaded. Arnie's head flies the fuck off, like onto the fucking railroad tracks. And elsewhere we cut to other townspeople and they all hear the howling of this werewolf. And obviously they just probably assume it's a regular wolf, but they all like pay attention to it. And now we get Jane's voiceover again, and she's explaining how nobody knew it was a werewolf at that time. Like, nobody knew anything was wrong because Arnie was known as being a drunk, and people just thought it was an accident and that he just got beheaded by the train by accident while he was working out there. So we cut to the townspeople. It's now during the day, and they're all going to some sort of celebration in the park. And Jane is explaining to us how this place is Tarker Mills, which this is one of Stephen King's many fictional cities, and in his universe, it's supposed to border Derry and some other major cities that his books take place in that are all fictional. But Jane explains that this is where she grew up, and at this time when this was happening, she was 15 and her brother Marty was 11. And Jane is sitting with her parents as this guy who is the town Reverend Lowe. He goes up and gives a speech, and Jane goes to leave to find Marty, and she finds him, and we see that Marty is played by Corey Haim, R.I.P. It makes me so sad to watch things with Corey Haim in it because he was just way too soon he was taken, and it was just like such tragic circumstances. But this would have been a couple years before he was in The Lost Boys. So he's just got such a baby face. Like, he is so young in this movie. He's a baby. And she ends up finding him, and we see that he is playing with his friend Brady, and they find this little garden snake, and his friend Brady comes up with this idea. He's like, oh, let's prank Jane with it. And Jane walks into the woods because she thinks that Marty's in there, and we see that Brady is in a tree holding the snake, and it startles her and she falls. And Brady starts laughing. She's yelling at him. Marty comes out, and we see that Marty is handicapped. He's in a wheelchair. So he comes over to her and he tells Brady to stop because he's like still laughing at her, and Jane is crying at this point. And this fucker Brady throws the snake at her as Jane is getting up, which causes her to fall back, and she falls into this like dirty, muddy puddle and ruins her pantyhose and her skirt. And Marty looks at her and says, sorry. Like, you can tell he obviously feels bad. He doesn't want anything to do with this. And Jane yells at him. She's like, I hate you. And she runs away. And Marty yells at Brady. He's like, dude, like, come on. So Jane ends up kind of going into the trees to like kind of calm herself down. It's not fully in the trees. Like, it's just, there's a few trees, but she's hiding behind a tree, and she sees this couple arguing, and the woman is like talking about being pregnant, and the man is denying that it's my baby. He's like, that's not my baby. Like, I don't give a fuck. And he leaves her just like crying on a park bench, and she's trying to say like, I don't know what to do. And he storms away. This man does not give a fuck. And we eventually see the family driving home. Jane is still upset in the back seat, and their mom is trying to encourage them to make up. And eventually they get home. Jane is still mad, but she brings Marty's wheelchair over to him so he can get out of the car. And Marty asks her if Uncle Red is coming to visit, and Jane says yeah, and she starts to make fun of Uncle Red for getting a divorce. She's like, he's getting his third divorce and he's a fucking drunk. I don't know why you look up to this man so much. And she walks away, and Marty tries to defend him. Like, you can tell Marty is upset by this. But later that night we see Jane asleep in her room, and Marty goes into her room. This is such a sweet little moment, and again, like, just because it's Corey Haim, I always just feel so sad for him. But he goes into Jane's room, and at first she pretends to be asleep, but then he takes out a couple dollars and puts it on her nightstand, and she wakes up and she asks, what is this for? And he says, for a new set of pantyhose. Is this going to be enough? Which, like, as somebody who like, you know, if you have siblings, like, you guys go head to head all the time. Like, it's just, you fucking hate each other and you love each other. But this is just such like a heartwarming, sweet moment between the two of them. And Jane ends up waking up, and she has like, she sees $2 and she gives him back $1. She's like, I can get them for this. Like, thank you. And he apologizes to her, and then he asks if it's true about Uncle Red. And she says, yes, and I'm sorry that I told you the way that I did. Like, basically, is it true that he's getting divorced again and that he's an alcoholic? And she's like, yeah, sorry to have to drop it on you that way. So we then cut to this other house. Again, it's nighttime out, and we see the woman that we saw arguing with that guy in the park. And she's sitting at her vanity, and she's got a portrait of this guy that she was arguing with at her vanity, which, like, smash that shit, bitch. Fuck this guy. And this woman's crying. She's obviously not doing well. And she looks at the picture of this guy. And as she's crying at her vanity, we see outside there's a POV beside her window, like looking at the house, kind of coming towards her window, which is upstairs. But we cut back to her and we see her in the mirror, and she says to herself, "Suicides go to hell, and I don't even care." So she starts to take a bunch of pills. And as this is happening, we see this POV is getting closer. And there's like this lattice thing on the side of the house that you can climb up to get to her window. And we see this hairy ass hand grab onto it and start climbing up to where she is. So she's taking these pills, but then suddenly she sees a shadow, and she turns and she screams, and suddenly this thing, which of course is a werewolf, bursts through and starts attacking her. And she starts screaming, and I'm assuming it's her mother. It's like this older woman downstairs. This woman hears her. I'm again guessing it's her mother. And she like starts to go upstairs, but then she goes and she starts looking around for a gun. And she grabs the gun and she runs upstairs, and we're getting this intercut with shots of this woman being absolutely torn apart by this werewolf. Like the fucking claws are scratching into her skin. There's blood everywhere. She's screaming. It's chaotic. And eventually the mom gets up and goes into the room to find this girl mutilated and dead, and she screams. So we cut to the sheriff's station. The sheriff is going to be like Joe Heller or something like that is his name. And the sheriff is pissed. He's on the phone and he calls like the state troopers in. And obviously we know that he's calling about this murder, because you can just tell this is a small town where like shit like this doesn't really happen. And we eventually cut to this bar, which this bar is supposed to be called Owen's Bar. And I think it's Owen's Bar in The Cycle of the Werewolf as well. And that's because Stephen King's son is named Owen. So he named it after his son. But in this bar, we see a bunch of people talking shit, and like the main ringleader of it is this guy named Andy, and he's basically talking about how like the sheriff sucks and like he isn't keeping the town safe, which I mean doesn't really seem like much else happens in this town, but okay, go off, sis. Now we cut to Marty, and we see that he has this mechanical wheelchair, and he wheels over to his friend Brady, and he sees him, and he's like, "Oh, look, it's Marty and the Silver Bullet." So like Silver Bullet is going to have two meanings here. And again, like the original book is not called Silver Bullet, it's called Cycle of the Werewolf, but I just love how it has two meanings, because you just assume Silver Bullet, it takes silver to kill a werewolf and lore, but it's also Marty, which I just think it's so cute. And he comes over with this little chair, and they're at school, and he ends up walking this girl, Tammy, home. It's this little girl named Tammy. She's so cute. And Marty tells her how his Uncle Red rigged up this machine. Like, that's how he has the Silver Bullet. His uncle put like a muffler or something on it, and that's how he's able to get around. And they're walking by, and they stop at the house, which is where this woman was killed, which we know because there's cops all around it. And they stop and they look for a second, and they hesitate, but eventually they continue on. And Tammy is upset about the murder. She's like, "Thanks for walking me home. Like, I thought it'd be creepy to go by that house." And she tells Marty that at night it's been getting scary out here, and she points over to this greenhouse that she has in her backyard, and she tells him that she's been hearing noises out there at night. And Marty kind of comforts her for a second, and she kisses him and goes to go back inside after her dad calls her in. So Marty starts leaving, and her dad, who's like standing on the porch drinking a beer in the middle of the day, looks at Marty, and he doesn't say it to his face, but he just like insults him out loud. He's like, "Damn cripples, like always on welfare," as he drinks his fucking beer and his dirty ass wife beater at fucking 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, you fat fuck. Sorry, just like don't insult Marty, okay? Corey Haim is precious to me. Do not insult my boy. So we see Marty going home, and he starts to run low on gas. So he ends up stopping at the gas station, and the gas station attendant like jokes with him. It's a cute moment between the two of them. And eventually Marty's home, and that night we see Uncle Red is there. And Uncle Red is played by Gary Busey, kind of like before he went really insane. But he's like telling Marty jokes, and Marty's laughing. They're playing cards, and Marty's mom just looks pissed. Like she obviously like does not want her brother, it's going to end up being her brother, like hanging out with her kid. Like she's pissed, and he's drinking too. Like he's drinking straight out of a bottle. Like he's not even trying to hide it. And eventually the mom comes over and makes Marty go to bed. She's like, "Okay, this is enough." She puts him in his little stair chair and sends him up to bed. And she goes over to talk to Red, and she's like, "I don't want you drinking around Marty." And they kind of argue back and forth for a minute. And he's like, "I don't like you telling me what to do." And he starts to explain how Marty is like, there's so much more to him than not being able to walk, which like is absolutely true. He's like, all you care about is like putting him to sleep, putting him in bed, like putting him in the bath and going on to the next day. Like there is more to him than just him needing help. And his mother looks at Red, and this is such a fucking, what a stab, because she looks at him and she says, yeah, I'm scared that one day he's going to give up and he doesn't need you showing him how to do it. And she just walks away like mic fucking drop. Like, oh, ooh, you twisted you didn't even stab him. You twisted the fucking knife and gutted him. So we cut back to Tammy's house and we see her fucking loser ass dad, and he's still drinking beer and he's watching a wrestling match. This is not to say that if you drink beer, you're a loser, because I myself have been known to drink beer at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, but I also don't make fun of handicapped people. So like, fuck this guy. But he's sitting in front of the TV and he's watching a wrestling match when suddenly he hears a noise outside. And the first time he kind of ignores it. We cut to outside and we zoom in on that greenhouse that Tammy had mentioned she was hearing noises from earlier. And back inside, we see him hear a noise again. So at this point, he gets up, he grabs a shotgun off the wall and he goes into the greenhouse and he's like looking around, and there's this music playing like you're expecting a jump scare or something. And suddenly you do get a jump scare when this spider drops from a web right in front of him. He gets startled by it, but then something shatters behind him and he turns and he sees that this pot has like suddenly like almost burst, like it falls and it just like bursts open, and then suddenly all the pots that are in the greenhouse start like rattling and falling over and breaking, and suddenly the werewolf jumps through the fucking floorboards. I don't know how the fuck this thing got underneath the greenhouse, but it is underneath the greenhouse and it jumps through the floorboards, and before this guy can even have a second to think or react, it grabs him and drags him under, and as it's dragging him under, one of the floorboards is like standing up and it impales him and he dies, and the werewolf drags his lifeless body underneath the greenhouse. Which, like, I mean, I'm not saying he deserved it, but nobody's gonna miss you. Anyway, we then got to this newspaper article that is talking about how this maniac claims another victim. So they assume that the guy or the person who killed the woman that was in her room, and now this guy, they think this is just a serial killer. They think this is a regular person. And it turns out the sheriff has put a curfew in place and they have no leads yet. So the sheriff has done nothing. And we see this guy like selling shotguns. Everybody's going to buy guns to try and defend themselves. And we just see like how panicked the town is. We see the townspeople all rushing to get home and like rushing to get inside, looking over their shoulders constantly. And now we cut to Marty, who is in the park playing with his friend Brady, and they both have kites, and Marty is getting his kite out of a tree, and his friend Brady has this yellow kite with a smiley face on it. That's going to come into play. And eventually Jane comes over and calls Marty home. She's like, Mom's pissed, like she's been looking for you, we got to go home. So he gets back in his chair and they start driving home, and he looks at Brady and is like, Brady, are you coming? And Brady says that he's going to stay for a little bit longer. And Marty kind of looks at him and hesitates, like he knows something is about to happen, and he eventually, like, he knows he can't really do anything about it, so he just follows Jane, and we see Brady just still flying his yellow smiley face kite. And now we cut back to that bar and we see that guy Owen, and he is once again talking shit about the sheriff, and this other cop who is in the bar comes over and starts kind of arguing with him, because he's like, well, if you're talking shit about the sheriff, you're talking shit about me, like shut the fuck up. So they kind of start to exchange words, but then suddenly this other guy walks in and he asks if anybody has seen my son Brady. So they all get distracted and now they're all focused on this. And sure enough, we cut to the sheriff carrying out a bloody yellow smiley face kite. So we know that Brady was the next victim. And the sheriff prays as he's carrying this, and the camera pans and zooms in on this gazebo, and it only shows it from a distance. We don't see it up close, but we can tell that there is a body, very bloody, in the middle of the gazebo. And Brady's dad eventually gets there and he runs over, and the sheriff tries to stop him, but the dad just like mows past him, and he goes over and he sees the body. And again, we don't see it, but we know that the dad saw it, and he just collapses and cries. And eventually we cut to the funeral, and Reverend Lowe is overseeing this funeral. Again, it's a small town, so it seems like he's the only clergy person in this town. And we see Uncle Red is there, and he like pulls out a flask, and then he like looks at Marty and he's like, ugh, and he puts the flask back. So at least he's like listening to his sister about not drinking around Marty. That's nice. That comment really fucking got to him, clearly. I would think about that every day for the rest of my life. So the Reverend goes on to say a prayer, and he includes in this prayer, the face of the beast always becomes known, and the time of the beast always passes, which is interesting. So after the funeral, we see Uncle Red take Marty home. Marty is obviously distraught by this, like that was his best friend. And Marty asks, well, first Red says like, God, I really hope they catch this guy. And Marty is like, what if it's not a guy? Like, what if it's some kind of monster? And he's dead serious, but Red just laughs. And he's like, what do you mean? And Marty's like, I don't know, like a werewolf or something. And Red is just like, yeah, good one. And just keeps laughing. He obviously doesn't believe him. But then Marty is like, well, Tammy told me that she was hearing growling and weird noises in the greenhouse, and then her dad was killed that night. And Red just thinks he's crazy. He's like, well, all the psychotics are more active when the moon is full anyway. Like, that has nothing to do with it. So we cut back to that bar and we see Andy and all the bar goers, and they're all like dressed in camouflage, and they all have like shotguns and shit, and they're all surrounding this map, and they're making plans, like breaking people into group and saying like, we're assigning you to this group, this is where you're gonna go, like assigning locations. And suddenly the sheriff comes in and tells them all to go home. He's like, go home, we're gonna catch him. And Andy is like, yeah, you've done such a great fucking job with that. Like, basically tells him he's useless, which, I mean, at this point 3 people have died in a very short span. And the sheriff tries to tell everybody like, this is a lynch mob, like you all need to go home. And Andy refuses, and they start arguing when suddenly Brady's dad interrupts, and he's like, I just came from my boy's funeral. And he goes right up to the sheriff and he's like, he was torn apart. And he yells at the sheriff and he starts yelling like, my son was torn to pieces. And he pulls out a picture of his son's body, and we don't see this either, we just like see the top of it, so we kind of get the idea that that's what he's showing these people. But he pulls it out to kind of like prove the point, like, this is what happened to my fucking son, and you just want us to stand by and do nothing. And the sheriff was like warning them against private justice. And Brady is like, you want to explain to my son private justice? I'm going to go on and I'm going to hunt myself up a little bit of private justice. And he goes on, and Andy and the crew was like, yeah, fuck you, sheriff. And they all go too. So they all leave, and like literally an angry mob. They're getting into cars, they're driving away, they're hooting and hollering, and the Reverend is outside trying to stop everybody as well. He's like, guys, this isn't right. And obviously everybody's just fucking ignoring him and driving right past him. And eventually they all drive out into the woods, and they all run into the woods. They have shotguns, they have dogs, they have flashlights, and we see that it's a full moon, or it's like close enough to a full moon still. And we see one group walking through the woods, and one guy like accidentally steps on a bear trap, the other one has to get him out. And we cut to Andy's group then, and we see them walking through the woods when suddenly they hear something, and they kind of start to argue about where the sound came from. One of them is like, it's coming from behind us. No, it's coming from in front of us. And eventually they wander into this really thick fog, and this fog is literally like up to their fucking chest almost. Like, they are like waist deep in fucking fog at the very least. And then they continue to hear growling, and they wonder where it's coming from, and they all pause in their tracks, and finally somebody hears it and is like, it's under the fog. It is right here with us. And as he's saying that, this claw comes up and grabs one of the guys and pulls him under, and then just throws him into the tree. We never see the full werewolf at this point. We just see his claws coming up because everything else is hidden by the fog. So another guy tells everybody to back up slowly, and sure enough, he's taken out next. The werewolf kills him next. And now Andy runs, and the guy that was just taken down comes up, and he's got like half of his face ripped off. Like, this thing has completely mutilated him. And everybody else runs, and they start being taken out one by one. And one guy tries to like take this bat that has a name written on it. He tries to take it. It's called the Peacemaker. And the werewolf takes it from the guy. Again, we just see his hand doing this, and the werewolf ends up beating this guy to death under the fog. So we then cut to church, and we see the Reverend now presiding over multiple caskets. So they're having a joint funeral for all these people that just got killed in the woods. And Brady's dad is in the crowd, and he looks devastated. The sheriff looks fucking pissed off, and the Reverend goes on to make a speech. And Brady suddenly is like, there is no comfort, only private justice. And he starts laughing. And the Reverend continues, but he starts like stuttering, and he looks like he's sweating, and you can tell that he's nervous, and everybody is staring at him, and they just look angry. Like, they are staring daggers into this man. And Brady's dad stands up and is like, Reverend, he was torn apart. And suddenly he starts transforming into a werewolf, as does everybody around him in the pews. And the Reverend is just watching this horrified and is just shouting. He's like, no. And he's stunned. He doesn't know what the fuck he's looking at. And suddenly, like, they're all turning, and like werewolves start bursting out of the caskets, and the Reverend wakes up screaming. It was just a bad dream. We cut to Marty, and we see his family pull up to the fairground because there's supposed to be like a fair going on with fireworks, but there's a sign on it saying that it was canceled. And obviously it was canceled because of all the murders. And Marty's all disappointed, and they go to leave, and we hear on the radio them talking about the curfew still. And eventually we cut to the family having a cookout. Uncle Red is there, and Marty is helping him do something in the garage, but the garage door is shut, so we can't see what it is. And Marty starts talking about the monster. Red still doesn't believe him, and eventually he interrupts him and is like, I have a surprise for you. And he opens the garage and he reveals that what he's been working on is a new silver bullet. And this thing is so cool looking. I'll put up a picture of it. It's so cute. It's a wheelchair, but it looks like a motorcycle. And there's like flames drawn into the side of it. And it has the word silver bullet written on the side. And it just looks crazy. It has this giant exhaust. So you know this thing fucking zooms. And Marty's all excited about it. He sits in the chair. Red shows him like where the controls are and how to start it, and he sends him off, and he fucking rips it. He is ripping it down the fucking road, like going faster than a car. He literally passes a car at one point. Like, this thing is like pimped out. Eventually he gets home and Red tells him like, I really need you to be careful on that thing, because like it'll be my fault if anything goes bad, you know. So eventually we see the family at the barbecue all eating, and Red says that he has to go, so he has Marty walk him out to his car, and he gives him a bunch of fireworks. He's like, I know that you're bummed about like the fireworks being canceled, but don't go crazy with these, but take them somewhere eventually and light them off yourself. Like, don't let this one crazy shithead stop the good guys. Like, basically still give everybody the fireworks that they deserve. And then he gives them this rocket, and he's like, save this for last. And Red gets in his car and he leaves, and he tells him to watch out for the werewolf, jokingly, because obviously he doesn't believe that there is a werewolf. So we cut to later that night, and we see Marty sneaking out of his bedroom, and he gets into his silver bullet and he takes it for a ride. And eventually he gets to this bridge, and he starts lighting a match, and he starts setting off these fireworks. And we cut down to the water, like we pan, and we see a reflection of the werewolf in the water. So we know it's not far. And Marty sets off another werewolf, and then suddenly we see the werewolf watching him. Marty sets off another firework, and we see the werewolf watching him. And this thing starts walking towards him as Marty just keeps setting off these fireworks completely unaware. And Marty eventually sets them all off, and he saved the rocket for last. So he lights that up as he sees the werewolf approaching him, coming towards him on the bridge. And he like struggles to light the rocket, and he aims it at the werewolf, and he sets it off, and he gets the thing in the fucking eye, like right in the eye. The rocket gets stuck in the werewolf, and the thing starts struggling, and it rips the firework out. And Marty sees that as his opportunity, and he turns around and he books it home, and he climbs back into his window, and he gets into his bed, and he curls up. He's obviously fucking terrified. So we then cut to Red. We see it's the middle of the night, and his phone rings, and when he picks it up, it's Marty telling him, I saw the werewolf. And Red again just thinks he's fucking insane. He's like, it was just a bad dream. There's no such thing as werewolves. And eventually he straight up hangs up on Marty. He's like, I've had enough of this. So the next day we see Marty telling his sister Jane, and we see Jane like listening to him, and we get a voiceover from adult Jane, and she's saying it was clearly unbelievable, but for some reason I believed him. Like, she could tell he was telling the truth. And we then cut to Jane going door to door, and her voiceover is explaining how Marty saw where the rocket struck, so I started going door to door, and she's collecting bottles and cans, and I was looking for a man or a woman with just one eye. So we see this montage of Jane going through the town door to door. She goes into the barber shop, and when she doesn't find anybody with one eye, she starts to think that Marty was lying until she gets to the church, and she sees the Reverend working outside in the garden, and she tells him, I'm here to turn in my bottles and cans. And we pan to him, and we see that he has an eye patch on his left eye. So Jane doesn't see it because his back is to her, so she goes back to put the bottles and cans in the shed where he directs her to go, and she doesn't see it right away. So she gets there, and she's startled by a mouse when she's in there, and she's like dropping all the bottles and stuff, and she knocks over a few bottles, and when she looks down, she sees a broken piece of wood, and she pulls it out, and she sees that it is a broken bat called the Peacemaker. So this was the bat of one of the people of the angry mob that went into the woods and ended up dying. And as she sees this, the Reverend comes up behind her and startles her, and she turns and sure enough sees that this motherfucker has one eye. He's got a fucking eye patch on. So it's at this moment that she knows, and she's terrified, and he calls her out for being scared. He's like, you're trembling. And she's like, oh, I don't feel good. Like, obviously trying to play it off. And she kind of starts to try to back out. And he's like, he offers her a ride home, and she says no. And she ultimately runs away. And as she's leaving, the Reverend tells her, give my best to your brother. Because this motherfucker now knows that she knows. So Jane goes and tells Marty, and she's just like, what are we going to do? And Marty's like, well, I'm going to start here. And he ends up writing an anonymous letter that basically is telling the Reverend, like, I know who you are. The best thing you could possibly do is kill yourself to stop you from hurting other people. Like, do everybody a favor and like fucking take yourself out, brother. Like, you're not well. So we see the Reverend getting this letter, and he crumples crumples it up, and Jane's voiceover explains that we sent him 2 more letters and then we told Uncle Red. And we cut to Uncle Red and he's pissed. He obviously, again, like doesn't believe them, and he's shocked that Jane believes him. He's like, you're the logical one. Like, I can't believe that you believe this. And he thinks that it was all a hallucination. He's like, you didn't see that bat. It was probably something else. And Red does go with them and like stakes out the Reverend, and they watch him in the yard. And he's like, if he was hit in the eye with a rocket, he would be in the hospital or dead. Like, there's no way he'd be alive. And Marty was like, but he wasn't human when he was hit with it. He was that thing. And Jane continues like insisting that she saw the bat, and she also explains that there was a weird smell in that garage, like there were dead animals or something in there. So eventually we cut to Marty. He's at the park and he's watching a bunch of kids play baseball. And this is like one of those sad moments because you see him and like he's focusing on everybody's legs. Like you can tell he's just like yearning to be able to walk and play with the kids, like, and just be like a normal kid and run around and stuff. And it's very sad. And as he's having this kind of moment by himself, behind him we see a car pull out, and sure enough, it's the Reverend watching him. And Marty starts up the silver bullet and he starts to go home, and we see the Reverend following him, and suddenly in his car he speeds up to catch up with Marty, and he tries to run Marty off the road. And Marty sees that it's the Reverend at this point, and he tries to run him off the bridge, but he misses. But the silver bullet, it's hit by the car, so it stops and it won't start again. And the car starts speeding for him again, and Marty manages to go forward a little bit, and he gets stuck in the bridge, and he's trying to start the silver bullet again, and it's stalling, and the Reverend gets behind him, and he manages to start the silver bullet in the nick of time before he's able to hit him with the car. And Marty, at this point, we see that he's low on fuel, but this chase continues, and we see that they are going towards an area where there's a sign that says bridge condemned, unsafe. So like, that's fucking great. And the chase continues, but eventually the Reverend's car gets stuck in the sand. So this allows Marty to get away, and he gets onto that condemned bridge, which is kind of enclosed, but as he gets in the middle of it, the thing dies. The silver bullet dies, and he's completely out of fuel. And outside we see a car coming from behind him, and sure enough, it's the Reverend. And he gets out and he walks over and he gets into the bridge, and he tells Marty, I'm sorry, I would never willingly hurt a child, but you've really left me no choice. Like, you should have left me alone. I can't kill myself because suicide is the greatest sin one can commit. And Stella, that woman from the beginning, was going to commit suicide, and she would be burning in hell right now. And I saved her life. Like, I might have killed her, but I saved her eternally. And all things serve God. And this again goes back to the Misery episode. If you listen to that, like, people with religious delusions are the scariest people on fucking earth because they truly don't even think they're doing any wrong. Like, he justifies killing this woman and like, oh, well, she was going to kill herself, so I saved her because she'd be burning in hell right now. This is hell. This is hell, and you are a fucking demon. Like, fuck you. So he calls Marty a meddling little shit and is like, you're going to have a terrible accident and you're going to fall in the river. And he starts to come closer to him, but then suddenly Marty hears something outside, and he looks and he sees a guy on a tractor, and he knows the guy from town, and he starts calling to him, and the guy hears him and turns, and the Reverend runs away like the little bitch that he is, and the guy comes in and helps Marty. So the day is saved and he didn't get killed. But then we see Marty with Red and Jane, and he tells them what happened, and Red is still kind of hesitant, but he ultimately looks at the silver bullet, and he asks Jane, without her seeing, what color is Reverend Lowe's car, and she says blue. And sure enough, he looks and he sees that there is blue paint scratched into the silver bullet from where he was hit. So he finally starts to believe them. And the next shot we get is Red talking to the sheriff, and he's like, I know that it's crazy, and I probably sound crazy too, but he really believes that it's Reverend Lowe, and I even think that this guy should be checked out, which the sheriff agrees. So that night, we see the sheriff go to the church, and he's calling out for Reverend Lowe, but nobody is around, and he instead goes into the garage where all those bottles and cans were, and he sees scratches on the side of Reverend Lowe's car, like where he hit the silver bullet. So now he's like, oh shit, like maybe he did actually attack this kid. But suddenly the Reverend pops out from the darkness, like he's just like lurking there in the shadows, and he comes towards the sheriff, and the sheriff pulls his gun on him and is like, I'm gonna need you to come with me. And the Reverend has no intention of going with him. So he goes, it's not my fault. And he picks up that bat, that broken bat that we had seen earlier, and he just swats the sheriff's gun out of his hand, like effortlessly with it. And then suddenly he starts to change. So this is the first time we see an actual transition. We get a werewolf transition here, and he starts to slowly change, and he smashes the sheriff in the head with the bat. And the sheriff falls like unconscious, but then comes to, and he watches as Reverend Lowe turns into a full werewolf werewolf and just continues to beat him with the bat until he's beaten him to death. So we cut to the next day and we see Marty talking to Red, and he's like, so the sheriff was going to check out the Reverend and now nobody's seen the sheriff. Like, something's up here and I need you to do something for me. And Marty takes off his medallion necklace, which is silver, and he gives it to Red, and he's like, I need you to go turn this into a silver bullet. And Red is confused because he's like, the moon wasn't even full. And Jane is like, well, those are the made up stories. Like, in the stories, it only happens on the full moon, but maybe he's like this all the time, and as the moon gets fuller, he just gets more powerful. So Jane ends up giving Red her necklace as well, which is a silver cross, and she's like, I want you to make a silver bullet with this too, like use both of them. And Red is like, well, how did this guy become a werewolf? And we never get the answer to that. And even Jane right here says, I don't know, and maybe he doesn't even know either. Like, maybe he's just always been like that. And Marty says, he's gonna come after me, I know he's gonna, but he's gonna wait until the moon is full, and that way he has all the power and he's full werewolf, no Reverend Lowe left, only the monster. And Red hesitates, but ultimately he agrees. And the next shot we get is him going into an ammo shop, and he like makes up a story about why he wants a silver bullet, but the guy makes it for him. We see the whole process, and we're getting a voiceover by Jan explaining how Marty had read all the stories about werewolves, and all of them kind of have differences in them, but the one thing they agree on is that it takes silver to kill a werewolf. So the guy ends up making this bullet, he gives it to Red, and he makes a comment about a werewolf, which, like, I think this guy was dead serious. Like, I think this guy knew that there's a werewolf in the town, and he's like, oh, what are you going to use it for, a werewolf? And he kind of just looks at Red, and Red looks at him, and then we just cut. Nothing is exchanged. So Jane's voiceover then says the next full moon, it came on Halloween. Of course it did. And it coincidentally happened that we were left with Uncle Red. So we see their parents leaving. They're going on like a weekend trip, and they say goodbye to everybody, and night falls. And we see the three of them in the living room all asleep, and Red has the gun on his lap, and suddenly the TV turns to static, and outside we see the POV of the werewolf approaching. And Red suddenly wakes up when he burns himself with a cigarette that he was holding, and when he wakes up, the kids wake up as well. And Red is pissed. He's like, it's almost 3 a.m. This guy is obviously not coming. Like, this is ridiculous. And Jane is like, well, the moon's not fully down yet. And he's like, I don't care. Like, this is too much. Red is telling them, like, I'll stay out here because I said that I would, but you two need to go to bed. And as he's saying this, Jane looks out the window and she sees the werewolf standing in the window, and she lets out this blood-curdling scream. And Red goes to the window with the gun, and he sees nothing. So he takes the silver bullet out of the gun, and he's like, listen, I'm starting to feel like an idiot. Like, your mind's playing tricks on you. You didn't see anything. And Jane is like terrified. She insists. She's like, no, I just saw it. And suddenly the power cuts out. And we see that in the back, the werewolf pulls the power out, like pulls the cord or whatever. And they're like, he's here. Like, that's obviously him. And Red at this point is still trying to say like, oh, it could be just a fuse. But then they hear something outside. And I love this part because of the misdirection, because they hear something like from the front, and they're all focused on the doorway. And we cut to Gary Busey, and behind him, the werewolf straight up clean jumps through the fucking wall. Like, not even just a window, bursts through the fucking wall and grabs Red and just fucking throws him into another wall. And now this part was done in one take, which is great. And apparently, like, they didn't rehearse it, so Gary Busey was not entirely sure how it was gonna go or where the werewolf was gonna jump through. So like, his reaction at this moment when he gets startled is genuine, because like, this was like a one take deal because they only had one take to break through the fucking wall. So before it throws him, Red tries to like hold the gun up and shoot it, but he has the silver bullet out of the fucking gun in his hand, and the thing throws him, and he drops both the gun and the bullet. And of course the bullet falls into this little like AC grate that's on the floor. And the werewolf is just like beating the shit out of Red. Like, he throws him into a wall. Jane tries to go for the gun, but the werewolf picks her up and like is holding her by the throat. Red gets up and hits him in the back with a chair to let her go. But then the werewolf turns and throws him again. And this time he throws him against a window, which Gary Busey actually did get injured here because he did his own stunts. And even though it was fake glass, like a part of it still got caught in his arm, and you can see that in the movie. And as this is happening, Marty is on the floor trying to reach through that grate to get the bullet, but he can't reach it. Red is fighting with this werewolf, and suddenly the werewolf comes at them. Like, it turns away from Red and it comes at them, and Marty manages to get the bullet in the nick of time, and he puts it in the gun, and he aims, and he fires, and he hits the werewolf in the other eye. This motherfucker, he's got good aim with eyes, so now he hits his other eye, and the werewolf falls to the ground. And we get this cool like reverse transition, which I really like the idea of this, of how like after the werewolf dies, he turns back human, and it's very slow, but we see it very like his fingers are like going back to a normal size, his toes, the hair is coming off of him, and eventually he transitions back into Reverend Lowe. And when he becomes the Reverend, they're all looking at him, and suddenly he bursts awake, like we get that final jump scare, but eventually he falls back dead. And the three of them kind of sit there in disbelief, and Jane hugs Red, and he asks Marty if he's all right. And I love this part because Marty goes, "I'm fine except for my legs." And Jane is like, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "I don't think I could walk," which is just like the cutest thing because obviously he was never able to walk anyway. And like, what a way to just, end this on a little dark humor joke like that. I think it's so cute. And Jane laughs and Marty tells her, "I love you." And she says, "I love you too." And the two of them hug. And the movie ends with the voiceover from adult Jane saying, "I wasn't always able to say that, but I can say it now. I love you too, Marty. Good night." And we cut to black and the credits roll and the movie ends. I love this movie. Is it a little bit cheesy at times? Yes, absolutely. But I think it is such a great werewolf movie. And at first, I think it is such a great whodunit. And like, obviously, signs are pointed at the Reverend, especially when he has that dream of all the werewolves coming to life in the church. Like, that's where you first start to suspect that it's him. But I just love like the mystery in the beginning and even after he's revealed. Werewolf movies are hard, especially if you're using practical effects, which they did in this movie, which I prefer practical effects over CGI any day. But the werewolf costume in this movie actually took them 3 months to construct. And it got to the point where when they started filming this movie, they didn't even have the costume done yet. So they were like struggling to get this thing done on time. And the director of this movie apparently hated how it ended up, like hated the design of it. I don't think it's terrible. Like I've seen better, but I've also seen worse. Like I don't think it's terrible. And it was actually made with real bear hair, which I think makes it really authentic looking. And I don't know, maybe I'm just biased because again, like this movie is very nostalgic to me, but I think it looks just fine. But yeah, as somebody who like doesn't historically love werewolf movies, that's not like one of my favorite subgenres, I do absolutely love this movie. I think it is so fun. I think it is so cute and heartwarming. I really love it. It's very near and dear to me. R.I.P. Corey Haim. I love him. And that's Silver Bullet, everybody. I love this movie. I hope if you're listening to this, you like this movie as well. Or maybe if you haven't seen it, maybe now you do want to go see it. I don't know. Check it out. Let me know what you think. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about Carrie. So we're going to talk about the original from 1976 versus the 2013 remake. And then Friday, we're going to be talking about Cujo, which is another creature movie. Actually, I'm looking at my calendar. I did 3 Fridays back to back of creature features because we did Silver Bullet and then we're doing Cujo and then we're doing The Mist, which is absolutely a creature feature. But then the final Friday is Thinner, which isn't a creature feature, but I love it still. But that is Silver Bullet, based on Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolves. If you guys haven't yet given me a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to me, it would be super helpful, helps push me out into the algorithm and find other people to join our lovely little community we have going on here. If you guys want to keep up with me until next episode, I am on TikTok and Instagram as horror_chronicles. I post every day, so you can keep up with me there. And until next time, watch more horror movies and stay spooky, my friends.